Welcome back to Random History, the podcast where we dig up the bizarre, the forgotten, and the downright weird stuff from the dusty archives of the past. I'm your navigator as we explore the little known events and people that make history such an amazing subject. These are not the topics you would have heard about in school. In fact, if you did hear about them, you're likely to think that they could not possibly be real. But they are. Today, we're diving into a story that sounds like it's straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster, but it's 100% real. We're talking about a church in Hiroshima, Japan, that stood tall against the unimaginable force of the atomic bomb dropped on 6 August 1945. Not only did the building survive, but so did the people inside it, against all odds. This is the story of the Jesuit Church of Our Lady of the Assumption, a tale of survival, faith, and what some would call a miracle. This is one of those that's going to have you scratching your heads. Let's set the stage. It's 6 August 1945 in Hiroshima, Japan. World War II is nearing its end, but Japan is still fighting. The city of Hiroshima, home to about 350,000 people, has been spared the intense firebombing that leveled places like Tokyo, where over 120,000 civilians died in a single night. Hiroshima is a key military hub, but it's also a vibrant civilian city. People are going through their morning routines, kids heading to school, workers to factories, families at home, when at 8:15 a single B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay dropped a bomb labeled Little Boy, the first atomic bomb used in warfare, from an altitude of about 31,000 feet above the city. The bomb detonated 2,000 feet above Hiroshima, creating a blinding flash and a shock wave equivalent to about 15,000 tons of TNT, and a firestorm that incinerated 70% of the city's buildings. An estimated 70,000 people were killed instantly, with tens of thousands more dying from injuries and radiation in the next weeks and months that follow. Wooden homes collapse, glass shatters, fires rage. But amid this apocalyptic destruction, a few structures remain standing. Most famously, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial, or Jinbaku Dome, a UNESCO World Heritage Site today, located only 150 meters from ground zero. Our story, though, centers on another survivor, the Jesuit Church of Our Lady of the Assumption, also known as the Noburichu Church, located about 1.2 kilometers, less than a mile from the hypocenter. This modest concrete rectory, home to 8 German Jesuit priests, including Father Hugo LaSalle, withstands the blast. Even more astonishingly, all 8 priests survive with minimal injuries and no apparent long-term radiation effects. In a city where 90% of doctors and nurses were killed or injured, and 42 out of the 45 hospitals destroyed, this is nothing short of extraordinary. So how did this happen? Was it the building's construction, divine intervention, or sheer luck? Let's dive into the details. Imagine you're in Hiroshima that morning. The air raid siren had sounded earlier, but was cleared by 7:30. So people are out and about, unaware of what's coming. Then, at 8:15, the Enola Gay releases Little Boy. The bomb falls for 43 seconds before detonating with a force that levels nearly every structure within a mile. The heat was so intense it caused burns miles away, and the radiation kills many who survived the initial blast. The Church of Our Lady of the Assumption, located in Noburichu, is a sturdy concrete building, unlike the wooden structures that dominated Hiroshima. When the bomb exploded, the rectory's windows were blown out, walls were cracked, and debris flew everywhere. But the structure held. Inside, the 8 priests were caught off guard. One survivor, Father Hubert Schiffer, later described looking into the sky and seeing a bright flash, followed by a deafening blast that felt like hundreds of needles stabbing him. Miraculously, none of the priests were seriously injured. This is where our story gets truly bizarre. People within 1,500 meters of the hypocenter faced a 50% mortality rate, and many who survived the blast died of radiation sickness soon after. Yet the priests were only 1,200 meters away, and they walked away unscathed and lived for decades. In fact, Father Schiffer lived until 1982. The concrete rectory walls likely shielded them from the worst of the heat and the blast, but the lack of radiation sickness is harder to explain. You see, radiation exposure causes leukemia and cancer and other illnesses in survivors for years. So, what saved these priests? Well, our story takes a turn into the realm of the uncanny here. In some Catholic circles, the survival of the priests and their rectory became known as the miracle of Hiroshima. Some claim the priests' daily devotion to the rosary, inspired by the 1917 Fatima apparitions, protected them from the bomb's deadly radiation. Father Schiffer, who became a prominent voice in sharing the story, reportedly spoke of their survival as extraordinary, though he was cautious about calling it a miracle in public records. Skeptics argue that it was the building's design. Reinforced concrete structures like the Jinbaku Dome were among the few to survive the blast due to Japan's earthquake-resistant architecture. The rectory's walls likely blocked the intense heat rays and partially shielded the priests from radiation, although gamma rays could still penetrate concrete. Still, the priest's long-term health, living decades without radiation-related illnesses, defies statistical odds. This miracle narrative gained traction, especially among Catholic communities. Posts on X described the priest's survival as a testament to their faith, with some claiming divine protection. However, these claims lack primary source evidence and remain inconclusive. The priests themselves focused on their mission to help survivors, not on promoting a miracle story. Let's explore another angle, the human spirit and resilience in the face of horror. The survival of the church and its priests stands in stark contrast to the human toll in Hiroshima. Haru Shimizu, a schoolteacher and Whitman scholar, was at a munitions factory that morning. He described a bright white flash, and a world turned grayish darkness. His 24-page account, written in flawless English, details the chaos. People trapped in crushed buildings, horrific burns, rivers filled with those seeking relief, many of them drowning. Shimizu suffered radiation sickness, but survived, later sharing his story with an American soldier named Bill Floyd as what he called a gift of friendship. Another survivor, Yoshido Matsushige, a photographer 1.7 miles from ground zero, captured the only immediate images of the aftermath. He described the scene as, quote, something out of hell, with dust obscuring everything and cries echoing from the rubble. Matsushige took just 5 photos, overwhelmed by the devastation. His images, developed in a radioactive stream, are haunting records of that day. These stories highlight the resilience of the Hibakusha, the atomic bomb survivors. Despite unimaginable loss, many like Shimizu and Matsushige dedicated their lives to rebuilding Hiroshima and advocating for peace. The Hibakusha became voices against nuclear weapons, with figures like Setsuko Thurlow, who survived Hiroshima and later accepted the Nobel Peace Prize for ICAN in 2017, emphasizing that each person had a name and their deaths must not be in vain. So why did the Jesuit church and its priests survive? Let's break it down. The rectory's concrete construction was key. Unlike Hiroshima's wooden homes, concrete buildings absorbed less heat and resisted the blast's downward force. The priests were likely shielded from the initial heat and radiation, though gamma rays did still pose a risk. Their survival without radiation sickness is statistically rare, as most survivors within 2,000 meters suffered long-term health issues. The miracle narrative adds a spiritual layer, While some attribute the priest's survival to divine protection through the praying of the rosary, no definitive evidence supports this. The priest's faith may have given them psychological strength, but the physical explanation, sturdy construction and distance from the hypocenter, seems more grounded. Still, the story's emotional power resonates, especially for those who see it as a sign of hope amid horror. The church's survival also raises question about the atomic bomb's morality. President Truman justified the bomb as a way to end the war quickly, saving lives compared to an invasion that could have killed millions of Japanese civilians, not to mention the millions of American servicemen. Critics argue that the civilian toll was needless. However, Japan's refusal to surrender left Truman no choice. According to the PBS article from The American Experience, the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were warned of an impending attack. These warnings were ignored, and over 200,000 civilians were killed as a result, versus the millions of dead if we were forced to invade. The use of the bomb brought the war to an end. So that's the story of the Jesuit Church of Our Lady of the Assumption, a building and its people who survived the unsurvivable. Was it a miracle, a fluke, or just good engineering? Maybe all three. What is undeniable, however, is the resilience of Hiroshima's people, who rebuilt their city and their lives. I have rather strong feelings on the use of the atomic bombs in World War II. Truman warned the people of Japan before the bombs were dropped. He gave the order to drop the first bomb. However, the military leaders of Japan refused to surrender. After the second bomb was dropped, many in the military still wanted to continue. Fortunately, Emperor Hirohito put a stop to it. Truman's decision ultimately allowed me to be born. You see, my father was a fighter pilot in World War II, and had the war continued, it is likely that he would have been sent to fight in the Pacific Theater. The life expectancy for fighter pilots in the Pacific Theater was somewhere between a few weeks and a few months. There are estimates that fighter pilots had between a 20 and 50% mortality rate in the Pacific. Another reason I believe that Truman made the right decision is the way the Japanese army treated those that they captured. Whether civilian or military, the invading Japanese soldiers treated those they conquered as if they were less than human. There are so many incidences of this throughout the war: Nanking, Shanghai, Bataan. In fact, for today's True Hero segment, I'm going to introduce you to a man that lived through the cruelty of the Japanese, only to be killed by friendly fire during an attempted prisoner transfer from one POW camp to another. Today, we're diving into the remarkable story of Willibald Charles Bianchi, a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army who earned the Medal of Honor for his extraordinary bravery during World War II. Bianchi's courage on the battlefield, his resilience as a prisoner of war, and his ultimate sacrifice embody the highest ideals of service. Let's explore his life, his heroic actions on 3 February 1942 near Bagag, Philippines, and the legacy he left behind. Willibald C. Bianchi was born on 12 March 1915 in New Ulm, Minnesota, a small town known for its strong community spirit. Growing up, Bianchi was shaped by the values of hard work and patriotism. After graduating from high school, he pursued higher education at South Dakota State University, earning his degree in 1939. During his time there, he joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps, or ROTC, a decision that set the course for his military career. In 1940, Bianchi received his commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army, and by 1942, he was serving as a first lieutenant with the 45th Infantry Regiment Philippine Scouts in the Philippines. This elite unit, composed of American officers and Filipino enlisted men, was known for its discipline and effectiveness. Bianchi's early life reflects the journey of many young Americans of this era, driven by a sense of duty to serve their country as global tensions escalated. His education and ROTC training prepared him for the challenges of leadership in a time of war, but nothing could fully prepare him for the trials he would face in the jungles of Bataan. On 3 February 1942, near Bagak in Bataan Province, the Philippine Islands, Bianchi's courage shone through in a moment of crisis. The Japanese forces had invaded the Philippines following the attack on Pearl Harbor, and American and Filipino troops were fighting desperately to hold the Bataan Peninsula. During a critical engagement, a rifle platoon from another company was tasked with eliminating two heavily fortified Japanese machine gun nests. Recognizing the danger, Bianchi voluntarily took charge, leading the part of the platoon into the fray. As the platoon advanced, Bianchi was wounded early in the action, taking 2 bullets through his left hand. Despite the pain, he refused first aid, discarded his rifle, and continued the assault with just his pistol. His determination was unshakable. Bianchi located one of the machine gun nests and personally silenced it with grenades, a feat requiring immense bravery under heavy fire. Moments later, he was hit again, this time by 2 machine gun bullets to the chest. Most would have faltered, but Bianchi's resolve held firm. He climbed atop an American tank, manned its anti-aircraft machine gun, and unleashed a barrage on the enemy position. He continued firing until a third severe wound knocked him off the tank. For these actions, marked by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, Bianchi was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation, issued by the War Department on 5 March 1942, highlights his selfless leadership and relentless courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Bianchi's actions not only disrupted the enemy, but also inspired those around him, embodying the spirit of sacrifice that defines the Medal of Honor. Tragically, Bianchi's heroism at Bagak was only the beginning of his ordeal. 2 months later, on 9 April 1942, Bataan fell to Japanese forces, and Bianchi was among the 60 to 80,000 American and Filipino soldiers captured. He endured the infamous Bataan Death March, a grueling 65-mile trek under brutal conditions, where prisoners were faced with starvation, dehydration, relentless cruelty. Also, if they fell behind or couldn't keep up, they were executed on the spot. Bianchi survived all this and spent over 2 years in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Despite these horrific conditions, he was known for his compassion, often bartering with his captors to secure extra food and medicine for his fellow prisoners. Bianchi's resilience and humanity in the face of such adversity reveal a man whose strength extended well beyond the battlefield. His efforts to ease the suffering of others, even while enduring his own, speak to the depth of his character. In December 1944, Bianchi was among a group of prisoners being transferred to Japan aboard an unmarked Japanese Hell ship. Tragically, on 9 January 1945, an American plane, unaware that the ship was carrying Allied prisoners, dropped a 1,000-pound bomb into the cargo hold, killing Bianchi instantly. His was one of the few bodies identified among the 400 men lost in the attack. Bianchi's death was a heartbreaking end to a life of courage and sacrifice. Bianchi was only one of 3 Philippine scouts to receive the Medal of Honor, and his legacy endures. A monument at South Dakota State University honors him alongside another alum named Leo Thorsness, who also won the Medal of Honor. Bianchi's body rests at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, Hawaii, a testament to his service. Willibald C. Bianchi's story is one of extraordinary bravery, resilience, and compassion. From the battlefields of Bataan to the horrors of captivity, he exemplified the values of duty and sacrifice. His Medal of Honor stands as a symbol of his unwavering commitment to his country and his fellow soldiers. As we reflect on his life, let us remember the countless others who served and sacrificed during World War II. I found out recently that a friend of mine, actually, I met her through my mother-in-law, was a survivor of the Japanese occupation of the Philippines. It turns out this woman's husband died as a result of the brutality of the Bataan Death March. She survived the war and internment, but would then return to her home state of Indiana and begin teaching for Fort Wayne Community Schools. She would then become an elementary school principal. In fact, she was the principal at the school where my mother in law had her first teaching position. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2014 at the age of 107. Her fortitude and grit were an inspiration to me throughout my teaching career. The lives of the heroes that I have introduced you to through this podcast are also an inspiration. Their bravery, sacrifice, and grit are key aspects of their character that earns them the title of American hero. This brings us to the end of another episode of Random History. I hope you enjoyed it and will come back and listen to future episodes. If you'd like to review the transcript or sources for this episode, click the link in the description. You can also make suggestions for future topics by clicking that same link or shooting us an email. As always, I want to thank Argos Media for producing Random History and to thank my wife for her continued support and inspiration. Until next time, make some history of your own. Navigator out.